A millionaire took his receptionist to a gala dinner, and what she did shocked everyone. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. It was late November in New York. The wind whipped through the skyscrapers like an omen, not of weather, but of headlines that would explode the next morning. At the top floor of Cooper International, the office of the CEO was still and cold. James Cooper stood motionless, hands in the pockets of his tailored slacks, eyes fixed on his monitor as if sheer will could force the numbers to shift in his favor. To the public, James was the portrait of success. Young, brilliant, impossibly composed. But to those who worked under him, he was a man of steel, controlling, relentless, and now under siege. Allegations of labor abuse and unethical business practices had shaken the company's foundation. Investors were pulling out. The media was circling. Employees whispered. And the gala tonight, it wasn't just an event. It was the last hand in a very high-stakes game. If James didn't win back investor confidence tonight, Cooper International would begin to crumble. The door swung open. Greg, his longtime assistant, stepped in, visibly flustered. "We've got a problem. Megan just called. She's not coming to the gala. Her mom was rushed to the hospital." James didn't flinch, didn't blink. He turned slowly towards the window, his reflection faint in the glass. A man watching his empire slip through his fingers. "We've got less than 4 hours," he said, his voice low, sharp. "I need someone on my arm. No distractions, no drama, nothing cheap." Greg hesitated. "I'll look at the staff list." James didn't respond. His gaze drifted down to the lobby below. Under the warm, dim light, a young woman was stacking late-arriving packages, moving quickly but carefully. White blouse, hair tied neatly, composed. Emma Taylor, the front desk receptionist, contract hire. No one ever paid her much attention, except right now, when she was the only person who wasn't walking away. "Bring her up, now!" The elevator doors slid open. Emma stepped into the CEO's office, her palms pressed against her sides to keep them from shaking. She'd never been this high up the building, figuratively or literally. James studied her like a sculptor studies raw marble. "You'll come with me to the gala tonight," he said. Emma blinked. "I'm sorry. I'm not sure I understand." "It's not a request. You'll smile. You'll dress appropriately. And most importantly, you'll say nothing. At all." There was silence. Emma could have said no. She didn't owe this man anything. But something in his tone, no, something in his eyes, told her this wasn't about ego. This was about survival. She nodded. James didn't thank her. He turned away. "Greg will handle the wardrobe. 7 p.m., don't be late." She left the room with her heart hammering in her chest. She'd never worn an evening gown, never stood beside a man worth over $1 billion, never thought her name would appear on the guest list of a high-profile investor gala. And she had no idea that just hours from now, everyone in that ballroom would know who she was. And from this moment forward, nothing in her life would ever be the same. The Grand Aurelius Hotel stood like a crystal fortress in the heart of Manhattan. Inside its ballroom, chandeliers shimmered overhead, casting a golden glow over gowns, tuxedos, and the quiet clinks of champagne flutes. This wasn't just another black tie event. This was where fortunes were decided. With one conversation, one smile, one misstep. James Cooper walked in as if the entire evening had been choreographed for him. Black tuxedo, perfect hair. An unreadable face. People didn't have to like him, only believe he was still in control. Walking beside him was Emma Taylor, quiet, graceful, and completely out of place. Her navy dress fit well, modest yet refined. No diamonds, no designer clutch, no practiced charm. just calm eyes and careful steps, like someone trying not to break anything, including herself. James hadn't said much on the way over, and she hadn't asked. All she knew was that tonight, she was the unknown name walking beside the man everyone wanted to shake hands with. As they crossed the threshold into the ballroom, conversations paused, heads turned, people murmured. Who was the young woman on James Cooper's arm? A girlfriend? A last-minute date? Some calculated PR stunt? James didn't break stride. His eyes locked onto a cluster of investors near the center of the room, led by Oliver Hayes, a heavy hitter with a sharp tongue and a reputation for cutting through pretense. James leaned slightly toward Emma and muttered, "Stay close. Don't speak unless spoken to." She nodded without replying, her breath steady but shallow. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to survive the evening. Oliver spotted them and smiled thinly as they approached. "Cooper," he greeted, extending his hand. "Always on time." Then his gaze shifted to Emma. "And you must be?" Before James could answer, Emma stepped forward. "Emma Taylor," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I work at Cooper International." Oliver blinked, mildly surprised and intrigued. "Do you now? Then I suppose you have a unique view on where the company's headed." James opened his mouth, but Emma was already speaking. "I believe every company hits rough patches," she began, "but real change doesn't start with numbers. It starts by listening to the people inside. Trust doesn't come from spreadsheets. It comes from how we act when everything's falling apart." The room went still. Her voice hadn't been loud, but it cut clean through the noise. For a second, even the soft music from the string quartet seemed to fade. James didn't move. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't the script. But for reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't interrupt. Oliver stared at Emma for a long moment, then gave the smallest of nods. "Well said, Miss Taylor." A few polite chuckles, then a single clap, then another, and within seconds, a ripple of applause passed through the ballroom. Emma didn't bask in it. She simply lowered her eyes, her expression unchanged. James remained silent. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. He just stood there, stunned, because for the first time in a very long time, someone else had taken control of the room. And it wasn't him. The next morning, the city was still cloaked in early mist, but the 49th floor of Cooper International was already lit up, humming with quiet tension. Emma Taylor stepped into the elevator with both hands clenched tightly around her purse straps, as if letting go would make her fall apart. Each step she took was measured, silent, but her heart carried the weight of everything unspoken. She didn't need to be told why she had been summoned. She already knew. James Cooper stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to the room as she entered. Morning light framed his silhouette in glass and steel. He didn't greet her. Didn't turn. "You ruined my plan." The words came like a verdict. "I told you to stay silent. Walk in, smile, nothing more, and instead you made yourself the center of attention." Emma didn't speak. She didn't plead. She knew any defense would only sound like an excuse. James turned to face her. His voice didn't rise, but it struck harder than a shout. "You're fired." Silence filled the room. Her heart sank, free-falling in her chest, but her face didn't flinch. Slowly, Emma nodded, her voice steady, even as something inside her cracked. "Understood, sir." Then she turned and walked out. Head held high, back straight. No tears, no begging. Only the soft tap of her heels echoing on the polished floor, and a quiet ache that settled in her chest like a bruise. She didn't go straight to the lobby. Instead, she stood in the hallway, staring at her reflection in the glass. the image of a woman who had just lost everything. Not because she failed, but because she told the truth. Later that afternoon, she was home. The dress from last night was zipped away, hung in the back of her closet like a memory she didn't know what to do with. She sat on the floor beside the sofa, knees drawn to her chest, her eyes blank. Her phone lit up. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity, instinct, fate, made her swipe to take the call. "Miss Taylor, this is Oliver Hayes." Emma blinked. She sat upright. "I know what you said last night wasn't scripted, and that's exactly why I'm calling." His voice was smooth, deliberate. "We need people like you. People who speak with honesty, even in a room full of power and pretense." Emma didn't breathe. "I want to offer you a position. Come to Paris. Lead Cooper International's European division." As CEO, the silence that followed stretched long and deep. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, from receptionist to CEO. But even as the words echoed in her mind, she knew. An offer like this never came without a cost. Not from someone like Oliver Hayes. This wasn't just about opportunity. This was a move on a chessboard, and she could either be a pawn or a player. "You have 48 hours to decide," he said. The call ended. Emma sat still, the phone in her hand, eyes fixed on the window. Outside, the late sunlight pierced through the gray sky, streaking her apartment with warmth she didn't expect. Somewhere in the wreckage of the morning, a new path had opened. But the question lingered in her heart. Would this be the road to freedom, or the beginning of a much larger war? The boardroom had never felt colder. Glass walls, black leather chairs, a long table like a battlefield waiting to be claimed. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a quiet war. James Cooper sat at the head of the table, fingers laced together, expression carved in stone. The other executives murmured among themselves, glancing occasionally at the clock, waiting for someone they didn't expect to see. Then the doors opened. Emma Taylor walked in. Gone was the receptionist in modest heels and borrowed dresses. She wore a tailored navy suit, her steps precise, unhurried. Her gaze swept the room calmly, like a woman who knew exactly what this moment meant, and who had earned the right to be there. James looked up slowly. When their eyes met, the room fell still. "Well," he said, voice like ice over glass. "Never thought I'd see the receptionist walk into a board meeting, unless she was bringing coffee." Emma didn't blink. "I suppose people change, or perhaps they were never seen clearly to begin with." James leaned back, unimpressed. Others in the room shifted awkwardly, caught between tension and curiosity. Emma opened her folder, revealing the plan she had worked on for nights without sleep. Her voice was calm, controlled. "Our company has survived by numbers, but survival is not success. I propose we lead with integrity, rebuild from the inside, corporate ethics, transparent communication, people-first leadership." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Every word was weighted, deliberate, like a bishop sliding across the chessboard. James cut in, his tone sharp. "This is a corporation, not a classroom. The market responds to data, not idealism." Emma closed her folder slowly, then looked at him, measured, unwavering. "Numbers are consequences. Culture is the cause." A few pens stopped moving. A few heads turned. Someone started taking notes. James narrowed his eyes. He was used to resistance, but this was something else. Emma wasn't rebelling. She was leading. And worse, people were listening. The silence in the room was not empty. It was thoughtful, as if a long-sealed window had just been cracked open, letting in the scent of something unfamiliar but necessary. Emma didn't gloat. She didn't flinch. She had walked into the lion's den not to fight, but to change the rules. And for the first time, James Cooper, powerful, polished, impenetrable, didn't know what move to make next. The Barcelona office crisis hit without warning. A walkout. Mid-level managers overwhelmed. Employees whispering about burnout, distrust, and silence from the top. Emma was the first to respond. James, predictably, wanted to send a memo. But this time, the board insisted. They go together. Their arrival was not glamorous, no red carpets, just tired eyes behind computer screens and staff whose loyalty was fraying by the hour. James stepped in, jaw clenched, ready to issue instructions. Emma, however, paused. She looked around. Really looked. She saw the fear in the interns, the frustration in the veterans, and something else. Exhaustion, not just physical, soul deep. Their first meeting with the local management unraveled quickly. Voices rose, James's tone sharpened. Emma countered, calm but firm. The room became a battlefield again. "You think empathy fixes everything?" James snapped, his voice low but biting. "And you think numbers hide everything?" Emma replied without flinching. It was war, until the hallway outside erupted in murmurs. The staff had gathered. The internal chaos had spilled into the open. James stepped forward and froze. So many eyes, so many questions, and none of them were interested in his profit graphs. Emma saw it, saw how his confidence wavered for just a second, and without a word, she stepped past him. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't carry a clipboard or read from a script. She simply stood in front of the employees and said, "We hear you. And we're not here to lecture or dismiss what you're feeling. We're here to rebuild, with you, not above you. No one deserves to feel invisible at work." It wasn't polished, it wasn't strategic, but it worked. Something in the room shifted, like tension easing from a clenched jaw. When it was over, James didn't speak on the ride back to the hotel. That night, the city hummed softly under the balcony of their hotel suite. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly in the distance, and the noise of the day felt like a distant wave, now softened by the night air. They sat quietly, each with a glass of wine. Between them, not silence, but something gentler, something patient. James finally broke it. "You make me feel—" He paused, not used to finishing sentences with honesty. "Like I'm no longer the center of everything, and I'm not sure I like that." Emma turned to him, gaze steady. "Maybe," she said softly. "It's time you learned how to share the center." James let out a half laugh, dry, a little sad. "The world doesn't revolve around one man, James," she added, her voice barely more than a whisper. "And maybe it never should have." He looked at her, for the first time, not as an opponent, not even as a threat, but as someone who could see straight through him and hadn't looked away. Down below, the city glowed. Above them, stars blinked in a sky too large to belong to just one man. And between them, a fragile truth had taken root. Respect. Admiration. Maybe even something more. But neither dared to name it. Not yet. It began with a subject line. No name, no sender. Just a whisper in digital form. For her eyes only. Emma opened the anonymous email late at night, alone in her apartment. Inside, PDF attachments, old documents, audit records, employee complaints, all pointing toward one uncomfortable truth. Years ago, under James Cooper's direct watch, a factory in Southeast Asia had been investigated for unethical labor practices. The story had been buried, silenced, paid off. She stared at the screen, her heart thudding, not from shock, but from the unbearable weight of realization. James had never mentioned this, not once, and now someone wanted her to have it. Emma didn't forward the files. She didn't leak them. She closed her laptop and let the documents sit in the dark, undisturbed, untouched, because she believed in James, or at least the man he was becoming. A week later, the world exploded. Front page. Cooper International implicated in suppressed labor scandal. The article was brutal, detailed, backed by the exact files Emma had received. In the boardroom, the tension was suffocating. Senior executives sat stiff, eyes darting, no one willing to speak first, except James. He stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, shoulders squared, voice cold as steel. There's only one person who had those documents. He didn't say her name, but his eyes were locked on Emma. You sold me out. Emma didn't flinch, but inside something cracked. Not from his accusation, but from the look on his face, a stranger's gaze, distant, cruel. She stood slowly, her voice quiet, but edged with something raw. I said nothing because I believed in you, James. I didn't act, not out of fear, but out of trust. She paused, swallowing back the lump in her throat. I trusted you were no longer that man. That maybe, just maybe, you were trying to be better. Her breath trembled, but her eyes didn't. But perhaps, she said softer now, my trust was misplaced. The room fell still, the kind of silence that arrives when something sacred has just been broken. James didn't respond. Not a word. Emma walked out, not with rage, not in tears, just quiet devastation, the kind that follows betrayal, not of actions, but of faith. And as the door closed behind her, James remained frozen in place, facing a truth he never thought he'd fear, that losing her trust hurt more than losing the company. For days, Emma said nothing. No defense, no protest, no attempts to clear her name. She simply worked, quietly, methodically, while James kept his distance, the coldness between them thick as glass. But beneath that silence, Emma was moving. She combed through digital logs, traced email trails, reviewed server access records at ungodly hours. Alone. Because she needed to know. Not just who had betrayed them, but why. What she found was worse than she imagined. The leak hadn't come from her. It had come from Greg, James's longtime assistant, the man who had stood beside him through every merger, every scandal, had used that trust to sow chaos. Emma didn't flinch. She printed the evidence, page after page. Login timestamps, external email transfers, IP logs from Greg's home computer. A full dossier. Then, without fanfare, she walked into James's office. He looked up, weary. Distrust still lingered in his eyes, until she placed the file on his desk. Her voice was calm. You deserve to know the truth. James opened it slowly. As he read, his face changed. Confusion turned to disbelief. Then, shame. When he finally looked up, Emma met his gaze. I could have gone to the board myself, she said, but I didn't, because I still believe it should come from you. There was no triumph in her tone, no gloating, just the quiet integrity of someone who chose what was right, even when it hurt. That afternoon, the boardroom was packed. Oliver Hayes sat near the end, smug as ever. Greg stood by James, clipboard in hand, as always. But not for long. James stood, the folder in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was steady, measured but louder than usual, not in volume, but in truth. Over the past week, this company has faced a storm, he began, and I accused the wrong person. He turned to Emma, just briefly, but it was enough. A silent apology. Today, he continued, we set the record straight. He laid out the evidence, each page, each detail delivered without hesitation. A betrayal from within, a calculated power grab. And Greg, red-faced, sweating, tried to speak, but no one listened. Then came the final blow. Oliver Hayes. Turns out Greg hadn't acted alone. The email trail led back to Oliver, using Greg to leak files that would destabilize James's authority and pave the way for a board takeover. When James revealed this, the room erupted. Not in shouts, but in motion. Executives turning, eyes narrowing, the tide shifting. Robert McCain, the most senior board member, stood. This company was nearly destroyed because of internal sabotage, he said. Effective immediately, Oliver Hayes is removed from the board. Applause didn't follow right away. It began softly. One hand, then another. Until the room swelled with it. Not for drama, not for victory, but for clarity, for truth. And when it did, two people stood at the center of that storm. Emma, whose unshakable integrity had carried the company through its darkest hour, and James, who, for once, had chosen accountability over pride. Their eyes met again, not as adversaries, not even as colleagues, but as two people who had walked through fire and learned to trust, not because it was easy, but because it was earned. The boardroom had emptied. Applause faded into silence. But for James, there was one more thing he needed to say, and only one person he needed to say it to. He found her in the hallway, standing by the tall windows that overlooked the city. Her arms were crossed, but not in defiance, just quiet reflection. Emma didn't turn when she heard his footsteps. She didn't need to. She knew it was him. "Emma," James said softly. She looked over her shoulder, tired but not unkind. "I owe you 100 apologies," he began, his voice low, edged with something that almost sounded like regret. "But that's not why I followed you." She said nothing, just watched him with those clear, steady eyes that had unnerved him from the very beginning. James took a breath. "I used to think I was strongest when I was in control, when I could plan every outcome, anticipate every move." He looked down for a second, searching for words, not numbers, not strategy, words that mattered. "But these last few weeks," he continued, eyes locking onto hers again, "I've realized I'm at my weakest when I'm around you." Emma's brows lifted slightly, curious. "I don't know what the future looks like," he admitted. "I don't have a roadmap for this, but I do know one thing." He stepped a little closer, not dramatic, not invasive, just enough to be present. "I want you by my side." No grand gesture, no ring, no crowd, just the truth, raw, stripped bare of power plays or rehearsed lines. For a long moment, Emma said nothing. Then she smiled. "Software real." "James," she said gently, "maybe that's the first real thing I've ever heard you say." He almost laughed. Almost. Emma took a step forward, narrowing the space between them. "If we do this," she added, "we do it as equals, no one behind, no one ahead." James nodded, the weight in his chest shifting into something lighter. She tilted her head, eyes searching his. "Let's rewrite what it means to be partners. Together." And in that moment, without rings, vows, or orchestras, they became something stronger than just CEO and executive, stronger than adversaries turned allies. They became two people brave enough to begin again. The city below was quiet, but the rooftop above Cooper International shimmered with a soft, golden glow. No violins, no grand entrance, just the hum of string lights swaying gently in the evening breeze and the quiet shuffle of guests turning to watch her. Emma stepped onto the rooftop, her dress ivory, simple, with no diamonds, no train. Her hair swept back, revealing a calm, radiant face that had weathered storms and built something beautiful from their aftermath. James stood waiting. Not as a CEO, not as a man used to command, but simply as hers. They met in the center, hands finding each other with the kind of ease that only comes from surviving the hardest parts together. Emma looked at him, voice steady, eyes reflecting the city lights. "We didn't just save a company, James. We created something new, a different way to trust, to lead, and to love." No one clapped, no one cheered. They listened. Because what unfolded wasn't a performance. It was a quiet promise between two people who had learned the value of presence, of choosing each other, even on the days it would have been easier not to. James's voice was lower than usual, not commanding, not rehearsed. "I spent my whole life thinking love was a distraction, a risk. But you made it my greatest decision." There were no rings exchanged in spectacle, no preacher shouting into a microphone, just whispered vows under a warm sky, vows not only of marriage, but of partnership, of showing up, of walking side by side even when the road twists. When Emma said, "I do," it wasn't the start of something perfect. It was the continuation of something real. Their guests rose, not for tradition, but because something about this moment felt sacred in its simplicity. And as they embraced, hearts steady, smiles soft, the final words of the evening hung in the air like a quiet anthem to everyone watching. When you believe in someone, not for who they've been, but for who they're trying to become, that's when you're truly building a future worth living.